Hello, everybody, and welcome to a Bright Founders Talk at Temy. Temy is an international software development company that designs, builds, and delivers software for sustainable businesses and promising startups. Welcome to our podcast, where we bring you the most inspiring stories of entrepreneurs and experts in the software development industry. And each week, we interview successful leaders who share their unique journeys and valuable insights. I'm your host, Barry, and today we are lucky enough to have an amazing guest joining us, Kim van Lavieren, co-founder and CTO at Dawnguard. Hello, Kim. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Barry. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. We love having you here. So thank you so much for taking time out of your day. We do appreciate it. Now, for those people who don't know you or your company, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and the company that you work at?
Yeah, absolutely. So from my side, so I'm Kim. I started in tech really early on. Started building software when I was about 10. Started my first company in high school, building secure web content management systems. Done quite a few things afterwards. Worked in the military, worked as security engineer, security architect, worked as a CISO, headed large engineering teams, security teams. And, ultimately, I ended up at a very, very large corporate doing enterprise security there. And I noticed that, the way we were approaching this problem was just really kind of broken. We were way too slow. So the business was always disappointed because it took us too long to review. And that's why I started PhD research, trying to figure out if we could really speed up this process and make it much more seamless. And that's where the idea behind Dawnguard comes from. So what Dawnguard does is really it accelerates the go-to-market for businesses in a secure way. So we allow you to optimize your existing cloud environments fully across basically all dimensions that you will have for architecture, as well as design new solutions from scratch in a secure way, all powered with AI.
So you've had like a lot of different kinds of jobs. So you're pretty eclectic when it comes to your skill set. Are there any skills in particular that you've acquired that have been really useful for you as CTO in your current company?
Yeah, so for me, I think it's mostly about leadership, right? Something that I've seen throughout basically every role I've filled, whether it was a managerial role or not. I think leadership is extremely important. Whether you can, just band people together to work towards a common goal as a team member, or you know, bring people together and get the best out of them as a manager. That's really for me the thing that's made the biggest difference. And I think for me, it really started, frankly, during my baseball career. I did a lot of sports when I was a kid, played in a national team, but it was really exacerbated by the military, where I was an officer, where you had to really lead under a lot of stress with very little sleep. And that's, I think, where I got some of the most valuable assets that I have available to me nowadays.
Was it during that time that was when you realized like, oh, cybersecurity, that is the thing that, really gets me excited, keeps me awake at night? Or was it something that you just kind of like, some people just happen to fall into a certain business? Or was it some kind of driven background that you had that made you go into this?
Yeah, so it was kind of driven early on by my dad. I was already building software, as I mentioned early on, but he told me, it's like, you need to focus on building software securely because nobody is paying attention to this. There are tons of ways to break software. And I mean, I thought breaking software was very interesting. So I started, of course, with hacking first. So I actually rolled into hacking, then professionally did penetration testing. And, as I got more and more into, breaching systems, I started to understand it's like you really should know both sides of the
Mm.
coin, right? Both offensive and defensive to really get the full picture. And from there on, my interest was peaked, and I just rolled into it and kept in the field because, in my mind, cybersecurity is probably one of the most challenging facets of IT because you need to understand software engineering, networking. You need to understand the human side of things. It really brings everything together, and I just really like that complexity, to be honest.
Yeah, I can imagine. And actually, cybersecurity, it's super important these days. I mean, as we've gone on it, as the internet's become more prevalent, as it seeps into every aspect of our daily lives, the demand for it is it's going to get more and more important if it isn't already as important as it can be. Now, in terms of like your role in your platform, like how did you go about setting up the company? How did you go about getting Dawnguard to where it is today?
Yeah. So we started out with a very small group of about 4 people, and we started the company in May this year. So we're actually fairly young. We went on to raise 3 million in capital from Benevolent Capital, great venture fund that we've been working with, and that really opened up opportunity for us to grow. So what I did is I looked through basically my history, looked at every company I worked at, and thought of what people would I want to work with again? What skill set would work the best in this setting? I reached out to a ton of those people, and most of them came over to Dawnguard. So I was able to build a team of staff engineers that I know, that I've worked with for a long time, that I trust, and they have helped me build out tech teams over all the different disciplines, and has allowed us to scale very quickly because we're with 24 people now. So we've grown quite fast in the last several months, but in a way that, you know, we know that the hires that we made fit perfectly with the company culture, and that they can deliver on the technical side what we need them to do.
Yeah. And so at the start, obviously, networking was very important. Is it still important now, even as you're progressing further into the development of the company?
Absolutely. I think networking for running any successful business is probably the most important thing. And that's what we've seen too. One of the reasons that we were able to get so much traction is because my co-founder Madi, he has an enormous network. He knows a lot of people. He's kind of a cyber celebrity, if you will. So especially in the Netherlands, but also in EU, everybody knows him. So it makes it very easy for us to get into contact with new engineers that might want to join, but also to find business opportunities and opportunities to partner. And I think, for any founder that's looking at setting up a company, you need to invest that time into building your network. Even if you're not currently working on building a company yourself, it will always help you out in the long run.
Mm. So let's dive a little bit into the company then. So, what role does AI play in your platform? And obviously, without giving too many secrets away, like how do you use it to detect and prevent vulnerabilities?
Yeah. So we do a couple different things. First off, we use AI as part of our own workflow, right? So we develop using AI. So large language models are a big part of, for example, performing code reviews, but also helping developers ship faster. That first off. But secondly, if you look at the core of our product, what we've done is we've tried to model the workflow of security engineers and architects, and in essence capture that process that these people go through fully manually nowadays, and try to capture that in AI. So in essence, what we've done is we've cut up the job scope of these people into separate engines, and these engines all fill a part of that process. And we use AI to mainly consume the large amounts of data that are involved. Because you have to imagine, in a large enterprise now, you might have a security engineering team. Security engineer gets an architecture drawing or a system design. They have to go through and look through all the laws that are applicable, look through all the design decisions, all the policies. They're looking through hundreds of documents. Then they have to place it in the context of their existing ecosystem. This can take weeks or sometimes months. So the main thing that we do at AI is vastly accelerate that process of going through all the documentation, finding out what is relevant for your specific question or the specific thing you're trying to secure, and bring that together. And then add a layer of reasoning over top of it that basically simulates the process a security architect or security engineer would normally reason about a subject like that. For us, it's the core of our product, right? It's very much an integral part of what we do.
What would you say the biggest challenge is for you at this stage? Is it the setting up and the development of the company? Is it the processes itself? Is it regulation? What is causing you the biggest headache?
So I think, oddly enough, I think still finding talent. Because, to scale your company, you have to find a large amount of talent. And it's very difficult to find that talent with just the right skill set.
Mm.
So the thing that keeps me up at night is mostly, how do we scale fast enough that we can stay ahead of our competition? We are frankly in a field where there is very little competition yet, but we know that there will be other companies that copy our idea. So how can we stay ahead of that competition? Well, the only way is by hiring the right talent and scaling up the organization. And that's really the biggest struggle that we have to find a balance between scaling up very fast with the right people, or scaling up even faster and risking hiring the wrong people, and that ultimately maybe even slowing you down.
Is being like a pioneer in a particular sector, is that something that you see as a plus or a negative? I think from some perspectives, being there early helps you get your foot in the door. But if you're trying to play catch up, sometimes you've got more impetus, more momentum to try and get somewhere faster. Like, in your opinion, which do you think is a better position?
I think it's almost impossible to tell, right? Because it depends on what are you trying to achieve. So for us, for Madi and I, when we started this company, we wanted to do something to fundamentally change the way we do cybersecurity. So frankly, if we were in a space where we would iterate on an existing idea or iterate on an existing product, I wouldn't be interested in starting this company. So for me, it was very much not a matter of is it better or not, but it's just I really want to make that change. And I feel like you have to be a pioneer to do that, right?
Mm.
So it does have some benefits because, as you said, when people ask what other tools could I buy, we can say there's no other tools you can buy because nobody does it. But on the other hand, of course, it's going to be much easier for other companies to come later on, look at our idea and replicate it. But I feel that, because we're taking that step, because we are the pioneers and we gather all this data, we're really putting a lot of effort into our customer experience that will still allow us to stay ahead of that competition over time. And so I think for us, it's mostly a catalyst that's going to help us scale even faster.
Lovely. So let's imagine that I'm a company. Like I watch this podcast and I think, yes, okay, I'm really interesting. And why wouldn't I be? What is the first step, like when I reach out to you in integrating like your security architecture tool, like into like our development process?
Yeah. So on the technical side, it's actually relatively easy. We don't need very complex deployments that have lots of agents or systems that need deployed in your network. But we can just connect to your cloud environment very simply within minutes. And then within the first hour, you already have a drawing of your architecture and you start getting the first insight. So that is actually a very seamless process. Where it takes a little bit of work is to figure out what makes the most sense in the flow of the way your teams work because some of our customers implement it in their dev teams. So it will be engineers that use the tool to design new solutions. There are organizations that use it for their security team. So they use it to review architectures, but not really design new things. But you could also do both. So it really depends on where are you trying to make the most impact. Is your bottleneck on the side of the security teams that cannot review fast enough? Is your problem on the side that your dev teams are over encumbered and they don't have time or expertise to get those security requirements cleared out and designed? Or is it both, which is
Mm.
the case in most large enterprises? So once we establish that, we determine which teams will help you roll it out to, and we guide the teams into incorporating it into the daily workflow. But the idea is that we don't require them to change the way they work too much. We actually do a lot of the heavy lifting for them. So many security tools that are on the shift left paradigm, they ask you to completely change your behavior. A dev engineer now has to do threat modeling or extensive requirements gathering. We skip all that. We just tell them focus on what you functionally want and we help you with the rest. So it makes it relatively easy, we feel, to incorporate in your workflow.
So are there any like common mistakes or misunderstandings that like stakeholders make when they're trying to like shift security left?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. And I think this is also a major reason why we haven't seen too many successful shift left efforts at many companies. The point is that many security people feel that everybody should think about security. But the fact of the matter is, it's just not a priority for a lot of stakeholders in your organization. Could be for all kinds of reasons, right? Could be lack of knowledge, could be lack of time, but it comes down to the fact that if we try to change human behavior to enable shift left, we're taking the hardest route possible. And I think that's where a lot of these initiatives failed. I've seen it in the past where I've ran development teams where I said, okay, we need to make threat models before we start building something. And then at the same time, our stakeholders are saying, oh, we need this feature tomorrow. So what is the first thing that gets dropped is the threat model, right?
Mm.
And that's why I think the common mistake that people make is changing that behavior rather than, enabling these teams to go through their workflow without extra effort.
Are there any like cybersecurity trends that you see today that you're really excited about, especially like maybe in terms of like cloud native and AI enabled environments?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, AI is really opening a lot of doors, especially in, for example, the SIM space or the security response space where we're able to process a lot more alerts more effectively. There's also really cool companies that perform automated penetration testing, which is great. We have a company here in the Netherlands, Hadrian, they do an awesome job with that. But you also see some other companies that, you know, are really making a difference with, say, agentic testing of systems, where they can say, hey, you have 1,000 vulnerabilities, but two of them are only exploitable. So
Mm.
this really helps cut through the noise and lets us focus on what's important. That's been a giant headache for, I think, pretty much every CISO, that their teams are getting more tools, they're getting more alerts, they get alert fatigue, they don't know what to focus on. And these tools are really, cutting through that noise and allowing them to refocus. And I think that's very exciting.
And when these stakeholders come to you, are they quite pragmatic about the risks? Are they like pretty educated in terms of what the vulnerabilities are, or do they often miss like some very obvious ones that you think that shouldn't have been missed?
So I think a lot of vulnerabilities are missed at different abstraction levels. So I think many companies have gotten a very good grip on, say, vulnerabilities inside of software. So things like SQL injection or cross-site scripting. These are things that we're thinking about, things that we're fixing, that we have tools around. But a lot of mistakes are missed on the architectural level. So poorly designed communication flows, poorly segmenting networks, those are things that are often overlooked because we look at security of, for example, an application in isolation of just that system. While a lot of these breaches actually come to play by issues that are throughout a chain of communication. And I think that's where a lot of companies still, kind of drop the ball, or even have blind spots, that they're not aware that these issues are even in place.
How do you see the increasing use of AI in software development like impacting the security architecture risk?
I think the way it's standing now, it actually increases risk for a large part, because we see an over reliance of developers and engineers on LLMs to generate new code. And LLMs can generate code very well. We see that. We use LLMs for code generation as well, but you have to give it enough context about your security. So you see some great products out there in the market like Lovable or Replit that do an awesome job at letting you prototype, but they don't produce things that are enterprise ready because they don't know what your current ecosystem looks like. They don't know what security context is needed. So they secure the code itself. They'll try to the best of their efforts, but they miss all those architectural issues and they miss the integration issues that you might have with your landscape. And I think until we're able to solve that problem, we'll introduce a ton more vulnerabilities using AI-based coding.
Mm.
Aside from the fact, of course, that it also brings upside, right? Code review using AI will help us catch secrets. All these things will help. But I feel that the velocity at which we can generate new code vastly outpaces the added value of AI in secure coding itself, right? So it will get better, and that's also something that we feel Dawnguard will play a role in, really helping these vibe coding tools establish the context that they need to also fix those architectural issues. But it's definitely something that we're not quite there yet.
Is there like one like major pain point in cybersecurity that if you could solve instantly, like you could wish you could solve it instantly, what would that be?
I think if I could solve it, is mainly the attackers outpacing the defense. Right? We see nation state actors, we see criminal organizations that their full focus is on divining new attacks, and they can do this with way more resources and speed than the defending parties can do. So if we could somehow level that playing field, either by having more budget for security and having more capacity on the defense side, or by being able to slow down the attackers, or even using AI to do defense faster, that would be great. But unfortunately, I think what we're seeing is that the attackers are actually evolving much faster using AI than the defensive side. So
Kim, that's really interesting that you said that. I've been doing this for such a long time. And every time there's a position to me, like the nuclear arms race, it's always positioned as the defenders are first and the hackers are working a way to get to the defenders level. This is the
yeah,
first time that I've heard someone say that actually the attackers seem to be ahead of the game. Is that unique to you? Is that a perspective that is something that really only you and your company share? Or is it something that people just don't want to say out loud?
I think the last thing, right? Because it begs the question, why are they ahead of us? And I think in a lot of ways, it's simple. They don't have rules to abide by. They can just do whatever they want. And of course, that's a very uncomforting thought. But I think across the cyber landscape, many leaders agree that the attackers are always a step ahead, or if not multiple steps ahead of the defenders. And of course, cybersecurity companies never like to say it this way, right? Because why would you want to market a product that you say, like, okay, we're protecting you, but we're not quite as good as the people that are attacking you? But it's definitely, I think, something that we can take for a fact.
So it's interesting because based on that, I suppose like you're talking about innovation and like responsibility of safeguarding regulatory restrictions.
Yeah.
Like, how do you balance innovation? Because you might have something that you think, oh, this is just amazing. This is going to really solve our problems. But actually, the regulations and the safeguarding responsibilities don't allow you to do that. How do you juggle those two things?
I don't have an answer to this in the sense of a perfect solution, right? It's something that I think there's a lot of discussion around, especially in the EU, because, of course, in the AI field, we're imposing a lot of new laws and regulations. But I actually have the stance that it's a good thing because,
So,
for example, the EU AI Act, for me, it's not so much about, protecting against all potential threats that we could have in the future because legislation is always behind the reality. But what it does do, it sets like an ethical framework for us in which we decide, okay, this type of AI usage we find okay, but this type of application we don't. And I think that's something that's very, very necessary. I've seen companies, for example, move out of a jurisdiction where those laws and regulations are more restrictive. But I think there are plenty of ways to do it within the regulatory environment that we have and still keep that pace of innovation. It's just a matter of, do you want to adhere to those? And do you, from the start, when you're building your product, think about those things, right? So something that I found extremely important when I started Dawnguard is that I wanted to follow the ISO 42001 Artificial Intelligence Management System standard that give you some guidance on how can you design a system that, is safe, secure, takes the human into account. And I think if you do that from the start, it's not a problem. But I feel there's a lot of companies that just start running with a technology, don't really anticipate what all could go wrong, and then find out later on when it's too late to fix it or when too much money is being made, and then complain about restrictive legislation.
very interesting perspective. I love you. You seem to be fresh and exciting in all different ways. So would you say that you're quite happy with the level of regulation at the moment, or do you think maybe there could be some tweaks or changes that would make your life a little bit easier? Without going into so much detail, you don't have to stay like name the exact legislations, for example.
Yeah. For me, I don't feel like we're being restricted by any regulations at this point. I feel that we can do our job and we can be innovative in this landscape, no problem at all. I think the most restrictions that we see are more around the business landscape, right? How it's more difficult for European companies to raise funding, for example. So there's been some great initiatives coming up to try to set up an incorporation that can cross the EU as one legal entity. So I think things like that will help us unblock far more than getting rid of AI legislation or privacy regulations. I think we need this. And I think it really, maybe it puts us behind innovation in China or the US where laws are less restrictive. But I also think it sets us apart and why I think a lot of people will start trusting European companies to secure their data and store the data rather than companies abroad.
And just before we finish, I'd like to ask you another two questions, if I may. The first one is, what does the future of Dawnguard look like? Is there anything, any new products, any new processes, or any new exciting things that you are doing that you can talk about at this moment?
Yeah, absolutely. So for us, we are still in the prototyping phase. So we are live with some customers now, but we won't become general availability until June, July next year. So we're of course expanding the scope of our product throughout that period. And what we hope to have by that time is a platform where you can literally just tell us in natural language what you need functionally, and we design it for you, fully aligned with all the laws and regulations you have to comply with, all your internal policies and standards, and we also build that code, deploy it for you, and then maintain it afterwards. And I think that prospect is very exciting to a lot of companies that we've been working with, and it will really also make it a lot easier to comply with those laws and regulations. Because if you just have to tell us what you need and we help you make it compliant, then those legal hurdles are really not a problem anymore at all.
Sounds amazing. I'm also excited to see where you go. So good luck. I'm sure you don't need it, but good luck and all the success for next year when you finally launch publicly. And the second question, and the final question, if I may, what advice would you give people who are maybe CEOs, CTOs, or co-founders or founders of companies looking to start up? Because you had a lot of experience over your life. What are the things that you would recommend to someone when they first set out?
So I think one of the important things to look at is that when you start a company, I would always advise get a co-founder. Don't do it by yourself. There are some examples, of course, of people that have done a great job, but it's difficult. It's a hard journey. So try to find somebody that you really trust, that you respect, that has similar views on life, on where you want to go with the company, because that will make a world of difference. If I look at the way Madi and I can work together, that has allowed us to be so fast, take all the steps that we've taken, and it also makes it enjoyable, right? I hear many founders complain about how difficult it is, how hard it is, how tiring it is. But frankly, for me so far, I've only enjoyed it. And yes, they're long days, it's hard work. But if you do it with people that you like, that you trust, it's going to be a very fun ride.
That's amazing and great advice, Kim. Thank you so much for sharing that pearl of wisdom. Okay, just want to thank you so much again, Kim, for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure talking with you.
Thanks, Barry. It was great a bit to be on the show.
Welcome. That was Kim van Lavieren, co-founder and CTO at Dawnguard.